Hello everybody, my name is Flavio, and today I'll be discussing about the 1918 flu pandemic. One of the reasons why I was so interested in this topic is because of the current events of COVID-19, and I wanted to see how it compares to the 1918 pandemic, and if there's anything that we can learn from it. Starting with its origins. It's known as the Spanish flu, yet it didn't quite originate in Spain. It's called this because at that time the pandemic was taking place during World War I, and Spain was a neutral country. Therefore, there was little restrictions in the reportings of the pandemic, and therefore it was thought that Spain was the major contributor. However, to this day it's still not clear exactly where it started. However, the most accepted finding is that of a joint research between the Canadians and the British research teams, and they believe that it started in China in the winter months of 1917. And at that time there was an outbreak going on within that country. However, the government didn't really consider it a pandemic and instead called it winter sickness. However, it did turn out to be much more than that. In terms of symptoms, the most common symptoms at that time were coughing, swelling, and breathing problems because of pneumonia. And pneumonia is an infection that takes place in the lungs that restricts your breathing. And of course, that proves to be quite fatal. Additionally, the problem with this virus is the fact that it didn't target a specific age group. In fact, almost everybody could have easily been infected. Children younger than 5, age groups between 18 and 40, and the older folks out there. Therefore, everybody was at risk. And the problem with this virus is the fact that it actually attacks the immune system. And the stronger the immune system was, the greater the response it had, and therefore it overreacted and caused the virus spread even more within the body. Now, in terms of spread, because there was no containment, there were 3 major waves. The first one was in the spring of 1918, and this was thought to be the wave that caused the spread in Europe. Basically, there was a group of Chinese workers that were known as the Chinese Labor Corps that were hired by the British government to do supportive and manual labor for the British war effort. And of course, this meant that the Chinese workers traveled to Britain, where it could then spread over Europe. However, it wasn't the first wave that was the most fatal. It was the second and third. And the second that started in the summer months of 1918, where different nations mobilized their troops into the battlefield, and therefore soldiers got the virus within combat. And then the third wave that occurred towards the winter months of 1918 and 1919 came back to the respective nations and therefore caused the virus to spread within civilians and thus caused the greatest fatality within the spread. Speaking of fatalities, the reason why this virus was so deadly is because it affected 1/3 of the world population at that time. That's 500 million cases. 50 million were dead. And in the United States, 200,000 people were dead. That, compared to COVID-19, is astronomical. And unfortunately, the problems were that the war was the primary focus at that time. And it was only later on that countries started to act on the virus. And secondly, it was the fact that they had limited medical resources. I mean, they didn't even know what they were fighting. They didn't even know it was a virus in the first place because microscopes didn't exist back then. They came around in the 1930s. Additionally, medical supplies were limited. And forget about vaccines, those didn't come around until later on. And even then, it would take a long time to develop. Nonetheless, actions were taken against the virus towards later stages. For instance, the idea of social distancing, wearing masks, and proper hygiene were implemented back then and were in fact the primary lines of defense against this virus, as it could spread through aerosol particles, which are air particles that are around us. Now, it did take time for the virus to be contained and for people to develop immunity. However, I want to conclude my presentation with one final note. As we've seen, pandemics, viruses, they can be unexpected, and more importantly, can spread in more than one wave. So while we're doing an effective job at the moment in containing the virus, we need to continue collaborating with local governments, medical experts, and follow the rules that are set in order to defeat this virus and return to normal life as we know it. And so with this, I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Hope everybody's well, and please take care of each other. Thank you very much, and have a blessing day.